Peace has been restored to South Africa, but 7/7/2021 is a date that will forever be marked in the country's contemporary history. On that Wednesday, the country experienced its worst outpouring of violence since apartheid ended 27 years ago. Parts of the country burst out in riot following its former President Jacob Zumas' imprisonment. But as riots rolled out like wildfire, they took on a life of their own, going on for some 2 weeks. And now it is to be seen if the ashes will cool down or erupt again. President Cyril Ramaphosa said the riots, which left around 300 dead and hundreds arrested, were a coordinated, well-planned attack on South Africa's young democracy. It came out shortly after that his phone had indeed been hacked by foreign intelligence services. Also, Zuma's hometown province of Natal Zulu doesn't seem to have automatically erupted after he was sentenced on the 29th of July to 15 months in jail for contempt of court. South Africa turmoil. In this episode, we've got two experts joining us here on Africa Today. They'll be sharing their views by Skype. First in line being Bram Hanekom. He's a human rights activist.
So it is highly suspicious that Israel appears to have been hacking our president's phone at this time of an attempted insurrection against our country and president. There is no doubt that it was an instigated, attempted insurrection which aimed to take advantage of the poor and hungry to lead them into violence to overthrow our government.
At the same time, former senior staffers of South Africa's state security agency who are loyal to Zuma appeared to be stoking violence. And there were unconfirmed reports that some prominent politicians sympathetic to Zuma were adding to the chaos instead of containing it. However, what the chaos brought out was the reality of the average South African suffering and pent-up anger. South Africa's unemployment rate is at 32%, with youth unemployment having climbed to 74%.
Believed by many, including myself, that part of the plan of this insurrection was to get poor people, women, children, members, ordinary South Africans from our black townships, our poorest communities, to go and steal and destroy shopping malls and much of our economic infrastructure, with an intention to provoke our government to use lethal force against its citizenry. If we had the soldiers or police shoot and kill a number of our citizens, that would have then become a rallying call for these elements, these rogue elements in our country, to say that the government of South Africa is at war with its people, it is killing South Africans, it is a dictatorship. Although there have been over 300 deaths. Most of the deaths have been stampedes where people were squashed when they were trying to get in and out the malls. Some were a result of communities defending their property from looters.
Roshan Jainath is from Pietermaritzburg, which is among the cities most affected by the riots and looting that ensued. He's a community activist with the Peace and Development Forum.
I absolutely agree that the rioting was not just a question of people responding to hunger as a result of the pandemic or even as a result of the imprisonment of the former President Jacob Zuma. I believe that whatever happened was intelligence driven. I believe that when you look at the former president's role in the African National Congress in exile, he was the head of intelligence. And he remained very strong in the security cluster, even during his presidency. Even when there were claims that he had captured the state with the other businessmen, the claim always remained that it was intelligence that enabled the capturing of certain state departments and, in fact, the state as a whole.
Another angle to suspicions is that to whatever end riots were intended or were veered into attacks on the country's originally Indian community. Zuma, together with 3 Indian brothers by the surname Gupta, seriously hurt South African sentiment by instances such as in 2013, using a military airbase to land wedding guests, when that privilege is reserved only for the head of state. The alliance between Zuma and the Guptas was so thick that they were collectively nicknamed Zupta, a name associated with several serious charges. Say Zuma's siphoning off state resources via the Guptas or their control over South African politics.
Unfortunately, some have been trying to divide our community into them and us, dividing the white people from the black people, and recently trying to divide the Indian community from the Zulu indigenous population of KZN.
Mr. Roshan thinks the ethnic aspect simply started out as a coincidence and had nothing to do with Indians.
In fact, you'd find that the majority of people who died in this rioting came from the poor African community. Although there's been this huge fears of homes being attacked in Indian areas and white businesses and Indian businesses, truth be told, there's a majority of black people that have died. If you go into town, if you go into African malls in former African communities, you'd find large-scale looting and burning of the malls that had African businessmen, some of whom did not have insurances. So this was to create a kind of impact on the entire community. I don't think anyone planned it to be racial.
In 2016, South Africa saw a major political controversy over allegations that the Gupta brothers had promised the then Deputy Finance Minister an elevation to the post of Finance Minister if he advanced their business interests. It was in 2015 that Zuma replaced Finance Minister Nene with a relatively unknown entity, Van Rooyen. Nene was fired after opposing a nuclear power deal with Russia as he believed the deal would cost the state R1 trillion. 3 months later in 2016, Jonas Gwangwa was offered 600 million rand by the Guptas to become finance minister and push the deal through. Jonas is a musician involved in politics.
Mr. Gupta directed me to a bar area and said that they were serious about offering me 600 million rand. And that it would be deposited into an account of my choice, and that they could open an account for me. I could stash it in Dubai. He said that to show they were serious, I quote, "I can give you 600,000 rands now."
With protests occurring for an array of reasons since 2016, in February 2018 the opposition brought a no-confidence motion against Jacob Zuma. The ANC had suffered enough humiliation, so it forced Jacob Zuma to step down as South Africa's president, and the Gupta brothers fled to the UAE, Dubai. ANC stands for African National Congress and is a social democratic political party which has been in power since the election of Nelson Mandela at the first free and fair elections in 1994. Recent riots all started with a court case gone bad, a case rooted in 2015 but turned sour in 2021. Why a court case at all? According to Zuma, for no good reason. He appeared at the hearing's opening session to plead innocence. He says he is the victim of a grand plot by apartheid and foreign intelligence services and accuses former ANC ministers of being apartheid spies, and says the plot is to finally kill him.
I have survived attempts to kill me. People looking to poison me or being instructed by their handlers to do so.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions. Zuma, a veteran of the struggle against white minority rule, may have had humane patriotic inspirations for joining politics, but charges he faces today have strong backup. His plea of innocence is in spite of 40 witnesses testifying to his guilt, emails leaked in 2017 indicating Gupta's influencing the Zuma government, and finally 16 charges of fraud he faces for his days as deputy president alone. He has tried to avoid prosecution for more than 10 years, but now he faces 2 broad sets of corruption charges. One relates to the $2 billion arms deal in 1999 when he was deputy president, and the other relates to his period of presidency during 2009 to 2018. It was over these allegations that Zuma refused to cooperate with the inquiry panel. He refused to testify or produce documents for the inquiry under Justice Zonda, and was so found in contempt.
It is declared that Mr. Jacob Zumas is guilty of the crime of contempt of court for failure to comply with the order made by this court in Secretary of the Judicial Commission of Inquiry into allegations of state capture, corruption and fraud in the public sector, including organs of state.
Zuma's strategy is known as the Stalingrad defense. House members are irritated by what looks like evasive methods he tends to employ.
Yes, the president answers a question, says absolutely nothing, and then he laughs.
Honorable
It means our
Dlozi,
questions are jokes here.
Honorable Dlozi, please take your seat.
But Speaker, you must protect
No,
us.
please take a seat.
The president has said absolutely nothing to the question, and then he laughs.
Honorable Dlozi.
This is not Trevor. I've been telling him this is not Trevor Noah's show.
No, I think you must
He
take
comes
the
to
House
laugh
seriously.
at us. He comes to laugh at questions in Parliament.
Honorable
The
Dlozi.
people of South Africa want answers.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I don't know how to stop my laughter.
It appears opting for 15 months for contempt can potentially work to prevent greater damage.
And if our democracy doesn't collapse, I think Jacob Zuma was going to end up in jail either way. And he merely chose to go to jail currently for refusing to speak and refusing to accept our judiciary instead of being convicted for corruption, which he may well have been found guilty of anyway. He's got a number of court cases going on concurrently, by the way. And recently today, the government is demanding a huge amount of money, which he was ordered to pay, and he hasn't paid from his family. So the walls are truly falling in on him and the Zuma family. And as a result, they're willing and have tried their very best to tear the country apart with the help of foreign agents and a network of criminals and corrupt politicians.
Finally, on the 19th of July, Zuma appeared virtually in the Pietermaritzburg High Court. And the judge Piet Cohen said on the 20th that the trial would be adjourned only until 10th or 13th August. So as we talk of peace having been restored to the country, we better tiptoe in.
Obviously, the investigations into this, the secret hand of all of this started, and I think it burnt out on its own. There's nothing to say that there won't be a second wave of this.
Here's how Zuma's alleged offences are so remarkable whilst damnable. He is wanted basically for state capture, charges with an Indian connection, the three Gupta brothers who moved to South Africa only in the 1990s when the country opened up to the world after apartheid. Having discovered that South Africa had surprisingly no red tape and bureaucracy, especially compared to India, the three peddlers came from Uttar Pradesh's Saharanpur and reportedly started selling shoes from their car. They soon upgraded, however, setting up a company called Sahara Computers. State capture, by the way, is systematic political corruption in which private interests influence the state's decision-making processes to their own advantage.
South Africa has very, very good laws. We have very good checks and balances and systems. Unfortunately, even with those systems and checks and balances, the president, former president, appears to have been able to influence big financial decisions and to be influenced by corruption and to have what is seen as a very corrupt relationship with the Gupta family. It is worth saying that South Africa is a country that is not unique in this regard. We've seen the corruption of the United States of America.
As the Gupta's business flourished and they developed political connections, they expanded from computers to air travel, energy, mining, technology, and media. Here it is, mining and energy, and deciding ministers for South Africa to get their deals through. Also, it's believed.
Largely, the ANC has been a progressive organization over many, many years. But this element of populism has come in together with the advent of the fake news on social media. And it has taken this country by storm. And I mean, there were bots. There was There was interventions from Indian bots, which we believe was largely due to the Gupta family, but that send out messages like clockwork, and pursuing a narrative that in fact Jacob Zuma was for the poor people.
The Gupta brothers fled South Africa after Jacob Zuma was forced to step down in 2018. They also have denied any wrongdoing.
The Guptas corruptly, it seems, managed to get South African citizenship. There are Indians from India and Indian origin, and they were born there, and they're an Indian family from India. But they did have South African passports. Recently, they applied for their passports to be renewed, and that was declined. Interpol are apparently on their heels, and at some point, hopefully, the Gupta family will be extradited back to South Africa to face justice.
Whether the ashes of this July cool or erupt, the ashes under the wildfire that was the riots, will depend greatly on policymaking henceforth and how Ramaphosa gets to play his cards. FT observes, the government's strategy is decided on a day-to-day basis, with press briefings failing to communicate a singular response. This is unfortunately characteristic of the ANC's inability to develop a cohesive vision to rebuild the country after apartheid and years of corruption, and to provide a viable future for the next generation. Intelligence services said they have identified individuals who coordinated and instigated the violence. This is while the police launched an ill-advised door-to-door campaign to seize looted goods if no receipts were produced. Mr. Jainath gives us another line of insight into actual causes of, or goals for, the turmoil.
The South African support for Palestine over the years. I'm not surprised that President Ramaphosa, or any ANC leader for that matter, might be targeted by that. But I don't see the link between Israel and what is happening here. If anything, I would think that what we have is a patronage network of business people. And if there are people that are involved in funding the insurrection, it would be business people, foreign business people. The true intention was to have black monopoly capital. So really, they were capitalists and pursuing the agenda of making billions of rands and taking it out of our country.
South Africa turmoil. As another example of discord or lack of coordination within government bodies, Ramaphosa described the violence as an insurrection. This is while Mapisa Nkwakula, a senior ANC member who also served as defense minister under Zuma, told Parliament the military saw no signs of an insurrection or attempted coup. Rather, it was a counter-revolution in the form of criminality and thuggery, as she put it. Then later, she agreed one led to the other, counter-revolution to insurrection, further confusing the government's position. It is such confusion that has made it difficult to find a solution in what could be a turning point in South Africa's young constitutional liberal democracy. Whatever the nature and intention of employing rogue elements and riling up the nation, it doesn't seem to have worked well for Zuma.
But the effect of that is the one province where the network that supported and supports former President Jacob Zuma is strongest is now overseeing a collapsed economy that needs to rebuild. They have shot themselves in the foot.
As for how Ramaphosa has done for himself and the country, he appears to have done some massive damage control by doing less rather than more.
Had they actually gone ahead and used a heavy hand in law enforcement, they could have turned the tide of those people desperate for food into a political consciousness against him. And I think the president and his cabinet avoided that.
It was the mob themselves that caused all the destruction and caused harm to themselves, because we were attacked and we had people open fire on us, and we basically had to safeguard ourselves by hiding behind walls and buildings.
The opposition party, EFF, and others were preparing to cry massacre, massacre, and use that as a reason to demand the recalling of our president and his resignation.
Still, damage to the economy will run to billions of dollars. Looting shops for food and electronics and the like may be commonplace with riots. But why this riot can be called an insurrection is there was what looked like a coordinated sabotage of vital infrastructure, of trucks along the artery linking Johannesburg, the largest city, with the port of Durban, as well as damage to telecoms towers, industrial warehouses, and a pharmaceutical plant, just to cite some examples.
When it came to the insurgency and how it was practiced, it was really with military precision. You'd find the poor communities that will rush into stores, right, and they will steal. But you will never find a high level of deaths in that scenario. Clearly, they were not violent. They were desperate for food. And obviously, the level of middle-class people going in and taking TVs and washing machines and so on, it happened. And there was that large scale of opportunism. Having said that, the actual poor mass that ran out into stores were not violent.
The best laid schemes of mice and men. If the intention was to portray Zuma's Zulus as victims, well, they'd still be in the same boat as everyone else. If Ramaphosa, once deputy to Zuma, acts quickly, now is the time to take full control of his party. That's the ANC, which was once headed by Zuma. Now that South Africans have had enough with the violence and ANC members' corruption, Ramaphosa could, with his ANC foes discredited, emerge from the crisis with greater levels of support. He could root out graft, breaking up and privatizing the state-owned enterprises which were plundered by politicians. However, danger is not completely out of the way.
If you do recall, President Ramaphosa himself was part of the team that drew up the constitution at CODESA. So he's a constitutional Democrat, and he has a very, very keen understanding of the importance of the constitution. If I may quote Oliver Tambo in 1988, whilst they had a conference looking at the draft constitution, and at the conclusion of that conference, Oliver Tambo said, "One day this constitution will save the ANC from itself."
The ANC could yet take an alternative route and use the crisis as justification to intervene even further in the economy. The ANC's 2015 policy document proclaimed that the party should view the Chinese Communist Party's economic policy as a guiding star. Controversial policies some party members are considering could erode property rights and frighten off investment. If it gets to do so and continues to protect its corrupt members, there's bound to be further turmoil rather than continued peace and stability in the country. Once before too, on Friday, July the 16th, the president had said calm had been restored. But hours later, a market was fireballed in Durban, which was not the worst hit town. Al Jazeera shows.
At night, Durban's different communities are still closing themselves in behind their own checkpoints.
There are outside elements that are coming here and get very upset when we have to ask them, what is your purpose here?
It's not quiet, it's not settling down. There's areas that no one's focusing on, and that's the concern. There are areas which are every day, there's looting, burning, still continuing, and no one sees that.
Hopefully, the next time we meet will be proof peace was indeed established. That'll be at the same times next week for another trip to any spot in Africa. Thanks for joining us today, and bye for now.